Hi, this is WION World is One, and you're watching the show with me, Isha Hanspal, and all the top stories today in this bulletin called Speed News. Presidential contenders Kamala Harris and Donald Trump participated in a fiery debate that could shift the narrative in the tight race to the White House. The televised 90-minute debate was held in Philadelphia at the National Constitution Center in Philadelphia. The two candidates launched into a bitter, fast-paced, energized exchange, clashing over several key issues facing the United States. That includes abortion, immigration, cost of living crisis, among others. During the debate, Kamala Harris pushed back on Donald Trump's national security credentials in a fiery exchange. Trump blamed Harris for the crisis in West Asia. He claimed that if elected, he will settle it as quickly as well as end the Russia-Ukraine war. Kamala Harris shot back at Trump, claiming that he was weak and wrong on national security and foreign policy. She accused him of wanting to become a dictator on day one of presidency. Singer Taylor Swift has endorsed Democrat Kamala Harris in the 2024 presidential contest against Donald Trump, hailing the US Vice President as a warrior. Taylor Swift revealed that she would cast her vote for Kamala Harris after watching the debate between former President Donald Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris. The pop superstar took to social media to endorse Vice President Kamala Harris's presidential bid, potentially activating her army of Swifties to head to the polls in November. Ahead of the presidential debate between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, hundreds of pro-Palestinian demonstrators marched on the streets in Philadelphia, holding signs and chanting slogans demanding a ceasefire and an end to the U.S. aid to Israel. Demonstrations then came to a halt on the east side of Philadelphia City Hall Plaza. Thousands of anti-war protesters in Australia clashed with the police outside a military arms convention in Melbourne. Protesters threw rocks, horse manure and tomatoes at the police horses and officers. Officers were seen using pepper spray against some protesters and were seen talking to others in custody. They were forcing protesters away from the convention center. According to the police, 24 police officers required medical treatment and 33 people had been arrested for offences including assaulting, obstructing police, arson and blocking roads. Around 1,800 police officers have been deployed to a Melbourne convention centre where the Land Forces International Land Defence Exposition is taking place from Wednesday until Friday. At least 5 people were killed in an Israeli airstrike on 2 bars in the West Bank. Red Crescent has said that its crews were able to retrieve the bodies from the bombing site and transferred them to a hospital. Meanwhile, the Israeli army said in a statement that as part of the counter-terrorism activity, an IAF aircraft struck an armed terrorist cell in Tubas area. The US Secretary of State Antony Blinken and UK Foreign Secretary David Lammy boarded a train at the Ukrainian border on a trip to visit President Volodymyr Zelensky and senior Ukrainian government officials. The US consulate in Poland said that the meeting will include discussions on continued support for Ukraine's defense against Russia's aggression and how to ensure Ukraine can thrive militarily, economically and democratically in the long term. Blinken is later scheduled to return to Poland, where he is scheduled to meet with senior Polish government officials to discuss a range of bilateral issues, including defense and energy cooperation. India says it is ready for any significant step aimed at ending the Ukraine conflict, but the participation of Russia is essential for any peace negotiation between the two countries. External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar made the statement addressing a media briefing in Berlin after talks with his German counterpart Annalena Baerbock. His remarks came amid the renewed push for peace talks over the Ukraine conflict and any possibility of India playing a role in bringing the warring countries to the negotiating table.
Все уничтожили.
Protesters stormed Mexico's parliament on Tuesday, forcing lawmakers to suspend debate on the controversial judicial reforms proposal. Mexico's Senate resumed debate at an alternative location after protesters broke into the Senate chamber mid-session. Demonstrators forced their way into the Senate building as debate was underway, making an escalation of weeks of widespread protest against the reform, which critics fear could undermine the country's rule of law. Backed by outgoing President Andres Manuel López Obrador and President-elect Claudia Sheinbaum, the new reforms will allow voters to elect over 6,000 judges and magistrates, including the Supreme Court. The Russian Navy has launched its biggest Ocean 2024 strategic exercises, which will run through September 16th. The exercises involve over 400 warships, submarines and support vessels, as well as over 120 naval aircraft, 7,000 units of weaponry, military and special hardware, and more than 90,000 personnel. According to the Russian Defense Ministry, the drills are being conducted across the Pacific and the Arctic Oceans, as well as the Mediterranean, the Caspian and the Baltic Seas. It said that the drills aim to expand cooperation with the navies of partner countries, including China, to perform joint maritime missions. Iran's new president Masoud Pezeshkian is in Iraq on his first foreign visit since taking office. Pezeshkian has vowed to make relations with neighboring countries a priority as he seeks to ease Iran's international isolation and mitigate the impact of US-led sanctions on its economy. His visit comes after Western powers announced fresh sanctions on Iran for supplying Russia with short-range missiles for use against Ukraine. It also comes amid turmoil in West Asia, sparked by the war in Gaza, which has rallied Iran-backed armed groups around the region. At least 10 people were injured, including one person who was serious, after a grenade exploded outside Bogota police station. Colombian authorities have launched an investigation and inspected the site. According to the mayor, Fernando Galan, the attack could be in retaliation to the arrests made of 90 people from criminal gangs operating in the area. Residents have been forced to flee their homes in northeastern Nigeria after a dam collapsed, unleashing severe flooding. The collapse of the Alao Dam in the state of Borno caused some of the state's worst flooding since the same dam collapsed 30 years ago and prompted many residents to flee their homes. The dam was at full capacity due to unusually high rains, according to the state government. Homes have been submerged by the flooding and roads turned into rivers. The dam collapse is compounding an existing humanitarian crisis in Borno due to the activities of Boko Haram insurgents. The insurgency, which has spilled across borders around Lake Chad, has killed more than 35,000 people, displaced 2.6 million others in the country's northeast region. Bolivian President Luis Arce has announced that fire crews will receive assistance from rented firefighting planes to combat the wildfires that forced the government to declare a national emergency. Over the past 3 months, Bolivia lost 400,000 hectares of grasslands and woods to the fires. The fires have gained intensity and has affected protected areas such as the Bolivian Amazon region. The government has called upon fire brigades from various regions, amassing a force of 5,000 firefighters.
Tirando porque el fuego está cerquinga, se está llegando con mucha densidad el fuego. Arde.
The governor of Loreto, in Peru's largest region bordering Colombia and Brazil, has declared an emergency in his jurisdiction in the midst of a drought and a decrease in the flow of the Amazon River that has caused the rise of food prices and decrease of river transportation. Loreto occupies almost a third of Peru and its capital, Iquitos, is the only regional capital in Peru that cannot be reached by road and can only be reached by boat or plane. Now, the Amazon originates in Peru and runs through Colombia and Brazil. According to Peru's National Meteorology and Hydrology Service, the Amazon River dropped 106.06 meters above sea level and is approaching the historic low reached in 2010 when it dropped to 105.38 meters. Larsen & Toubro plans to invest more than $300 million to create a chip company. L&T joins other Indian conglomerates in a push to build out a semiconductor industry in the world's most populous country. The Tech2 construction company will spend the money over 3 years to establish a fabless chip maker. Global as well as local companies are trying to capitalize on India's effort to build local semiconductor capacity and cut down expensive imports, seeking to tap government subsidies. Meanwhile, Amazon is set to invest $10.5 billion in Britain over the next 5 years. The company is expected to create thousands of jobs via its web services arm. The announcement is a welcome boon for Britain's recently elected Labour government. The investment to build, operate and maintain data centres in the UK could contribute $18.3 billion to the country's gross domestic product, which is the GDP, and support more than 14,000 jobs annually across the supply chain. It is the firm's latest announcement of a large investment in a European country as its AWS cloud computing division. A European business group said that China must reprioritize economic growth and reforms and boost investor confidence by leveling the playing field for all companies in the country. With business confidence now at an all-time low over lagging domestic demand and overcapacity in certain industries, the annual European Business in China position paper called on China to open its economy and allow a more free market to determine a resource allocation. It also recommended introducing policies to boost domestic demand. Profit margins in China are at or below the global average for two-thirds of the companies surveyed earlier in the year. The EU has launched a call for AI factories to speed up AI development using Euro HPC supercomputers. AI factories will support startups, industries and researchers by offering data, computing and storage services. Now, as per the European Commission, the initiative aims to boost the EU's leadership in AI and will be connected to EU member states' AI initiatives. AI factories will focus on industries like healthcare, energy and transport. NetEase Games has announced designated dates and times when children in China will be allowed to play its video games during the Mid-Autumn Festival and National Day holidays. NetEase Games is a leading Chinese video game developer and publisher known for its popular online and mobile games. According to the company, access to its games for minors will be restricted on September 14th, 29th and October 12th. In 2021, China implemented regulations limiting gaming time for anyone under 18 to curb addiction. Air taxi manufacturer Joby Aviation has announced that it has applied for approval to launch commercial air transport services in the UAE. As part of the certification process, the US-based company will create operating manuals for its air taxis and undergo facility inspections in the UAE. Not just that, the air taxi maker will have its pilot and mechanic training along with flight operations reviewed by UAE's Civil Aviation Authority. India's Home Minister Amit Shah has announced new steps to combat cybercrime in the country. The measures include the creation of a cyber fraud mitigation center, a web-based data sharing platform for cybercrime information, and the deployment of 5,000 cyber commandos. The government plans to train these cyber commandos over the next 5 years to improve the country's cyber security. For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.